Check this, I'm sick of the tricks, sick of the purists. For ages we misfits, not talking about what day it is. The world has made us into capitalistic fatalists. I'm looking around the place, I can't find the folks that I came with us. One love, one God, one world, one something. Below the words that don't mean nothing. You can't fool me with fantasy circus, circling semblances of sacred service. Only want to know, what is your holy purpose? I and I is a fighting soul. I am one man, but I am you also. Spread the wealth, slake the world's thirst. But now we can only save the world when we save ourselves first. We got to purify. From the inside out. From the inside out. From the inside out.
This is an update on the journey back to remembrance of the true self. I've tried to make this video a bunch of times. There's a lot of stuff going on in my head and I want to get it down. It's helpful for me and I hope it can help some others. For what it's worth, I do spend a lot of time self-analysing, and I know people do say that analysis is paralysis, and it's not just a catchy little rhyme, it's absolutely true. If you spend too much time in the mind just trying to figure things out, analyse things, you do become paralysed. But at the same time, there is a lot to be learned. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about what it means to be human. I've learned a lot about what it means to be something other than human, having a temporary human experience. So when I started digging into, as much as it is possible to do so, my own subconscious, which is, you know, where all your beliefs and ideas about the world seem to be stemming from, I didn't initially feel like I was making much progress, because intellectually it's a very difficult thing to understand. It's a very difficult thing to do for yourself. Professionals who do this for people, I guess you call them shrinks, psychologists, psychoanalysts maybe. They do have to train, and they do have to learn a very different way of looking at and thinking about human behaviour. But obviously I'm figuring this out for myself through YouTube videos, through personal experience. Ultimately I'm trying to let go of thinking. I'm trying to get away from the mind. It's kind of futile even talking about this kind of stuff. I just want to leave it here so I can come back. It's a record of my progress. It could definitely help someone else, okay? So that's why I'm doing this. There's going to be a positive conclusion as well. It's going to be quite an unhappy video potentially, but you know, I was trying to figure out, like, where does it come from? Where does all this pain come from? I can't look at my life and say that there's anything particularly difficult or problematic for me now, but you know, we all had formative experiences when we were children that program us. In digging back into the subconscious, eventually I started to get results. I started to get at least pointers to what was going on, and I found a terrific amount of anger, which I never saw in myself when I was still unconscious in my 20s. You know, by that time I discovered, well, in my teens I discovered cigarettes and alcohol, and I believe therein was the main means of keeping myself unconscious. But the whole planet, the whole realm is raising in frequency, and you know, it's affecting all of us, all life forms, to different degrees. Some people, you know, they only go so far with it. Some of us, it seems, are here to really do it for real, to wake up. And I feel like that's my purpose, because whenever I try to rest on my laurels, whenever I try to just be okay with the level I've reached, you know, it only lasts so long. I need to get back to the process. The higher you intend to raise your consciousness, the deeper into yourself you must go. This is why ascension is such a misleading term. It implies movement in only one direction, when in actual fact, expansion is closer to how this feels. Expansion implies movement in all directions simultaneously. Also, common for many of us undergoing this process is the feeling of slipping back or of going round in circles. The truth, however, is that although the path we walk is winding in nature, this is definitely a one-way ticket. The state of my leg, that is the clearest indicator that there is something purging. There is a purification taking place. Something is coming out of me, and it's subconscious. Lust was a little bit of a thing, but this terrific anger. I talked to my parents and I couldn't really get any leads on it. It didn't really make sense. But eventually I knew what it was, because there was this time years ago when I was out having dinner with my grandmother and my sister, and we were talking about how would you explain to a young child, like a little child, that stealing, taking something without paying for it from a shop was a specific example. Explain to a child that that is wrong, it's unacceptable, you can't just do that. And I was like, I don't know how you'd explain that to a kid. It seems they understand, this is mine, this is my brother's, but they're not really going to understand money. That's something else they're going to have to understand. But the way she explained it was, she just said, you have to tell the child that it's wrong to steal, it's wrong to take what's not yours. And each syllable of the phrase she was speaking, she was jabbing her finger onto the table. And it kind of, I had that feeling in my body, like my whole body went tense. And I kind of felt like she's done that to me in the past. She's maybe jabbed her finger into my shoulder, I don't know. But it doesn't matter what, it doesn't matter how old we get, there's always a child in us, right? The inner child, you've heard of that. And the inner child is not just when you have a midlife crisis and buy a fucking motorcycle. It's something in you that never loses its innocence. And my understanding now is kind of, I'm not just going to slate an entire generation, but you know, it's an old school, what I call a one-size-fits-all approach to parenting that my grandmother was employing. And for a child like me, the specific psychological makeup that I have, which I've learnt about, like I say, through self-analysis, through astrology, helped me a great deal. Because I have 3 siblings, okay, and no doubt they received the same conditional love. This is the thing, it's conditional love, where one moment the child is praised, and then the next moment it flips to being, you know, pointing the finger. And I'm not going to try and explain this to you, I'm just going to tell you this is the way it is, this is the way it is not. And my 3 siblings don't seem to have the kind of problems I have. I don't know, I haven't asked them if they experience repressed anger. Maybe they're unconscious enough still that they haven't experienced it. With me, this is definitely a process that is taking place, something I consented to, something that I stood up and said, I'm ready for this to happen. There is a relatively widely circulated quote, often attributed to one of a few different historical sources, which states, "Give me a child until he is 7 and I will show you the man." This is most commonly interpreted as meaning that the experiences and lessons we receive in the first 7 years of life will make up the vast majority of our psychological programming for the rest of our lives. The subconscious programs we accept in the first 7 years of life build up a momentum of their own, like a flywheel. My relationship with my grandmother, and potentially also that with my mother, instilled in my child self the belief that love was conditional and could be suddenly withdrawn without notice for reasons which were inexplicable. To a young child, incapable of the level of abstract thought necessary to interpret adult behaviour, and entirely dependent on relatives for survival, this withdrawal of love would represent a death sentence. As we grow up, we may forget all about our childhood experiences, but they are still there in our subconscious, waiting for any experience which resonates with that initial wound. I specifically recall around the age of 15 being rejected by a girl I had decided I liked, and the reaction this produced in me was completely out of proportion to the situation. Why? Because subconsciously I was reliving that sensation of all or nothingness, complete rejection. The new situation had engaged with and taken on the momentum of that flywheel. The manifestation of this reaction was a seething passive aggression, although it was thankfully short-lived. At the age of 27, I found myself in a similar situation, and a similar thing happened, although this time it was much more drawn out. That trigger remained in my life for something like a year until I was broken by it. Not the situation itself, but the psychological pattern which had arisen in me in resonance. It was that of a poisonous anger, both directed at the trigger for the way I had perceived their behaviour, and at myself for losing control. Again, this anger was passive-aggressive. The near-complete shattering of the false ego identity experienced at this time was really the beginning of my awakening. These patterns are extremely common in human beings, but most of us, myself included for much of my young life, will self-medicate with alcohol or perhaps stronger prescription stuff, or just as likely lose ourselves in the brightly coloured fantasy of Matrix life, and consistently anaesthetize ourselves to the recurring pain which, if ever fully experienced, would be the seed of our expanded self-awareness. I made some notes, I've got some pointers, because like I say, I tried to make this video so many times. Even the power of editing, you can't always make it make sense. So, right, anyone who's read Eckhart Tolle, you're going to recognise a lot of this. That guy's work and that guy's insights have really helped me. And you know, some of the new acquaintances I'm making for YouTube, I mean, I call them acquaintances. I think there's more to it than that. You know, there's some pretty cool people that you can find just on YouTube, right? So this is something I picked up from Tolle. As awareness, or what he calls presence, grows, we think to ourselves, am I getting worse? The thing is, according to Tolle, is that now we can see the patterns, whereas before we were the patterns. So that the anger I experience now, it's never directed at people, it's always directed at inanimate objects. There's always a delay before I catch it, but what he's saying, and I've experienced this, is like when you're completely identified with the anger, when you're completely unconscious, it is you, but the more presence you have, the quicker you will react to it and you'll catch it. And I can do this now. Sometimes it's just a few seconds. You let it go and you know it's part of the process. What else have we got here? The process is automatic. Once begun, it cannot truly be stopped. This is one I've picked up from this guy, Devin Maggi, American fella. He's got this channel called Flat Earth Paradise, and he's been doing YouTube for a long time, and the man's got some really detailed and dense and deep videos. He goes deep with this stuff, but he comes to really, really beautiful conclusions. And one of the things that he has concluded, I would say, and one of the things he's taught me, is that this process of awakening is automatic. Once begun, it cannot be stopped. We can't fuck this up, he said specifically in videos. And I totally agree with the guy. We can't fuck this up. The process is automatic. But in the case of people like me, we've made it conscious, and at times it can be extremely uncomfortable. Nothing more to say on that. I'm going to leave you with some MC Xander. Some powerful lyrics. Thanks for watching.
So yes, be angry, yes, be mad, yes, be shocked and on. Whatever the fuck you do, don't be bored. Yes, the beat don't stop, this epoch's not the end. Cities chock-a-block, but still got oxygen. Still got something to fight for, die for, something to live my life for. And I intend to be one of the survivors, but that's it, cause the butt starts with us. No ifs, no buts, no matter who you cuss. If you're not on the bus, it won't be enough to save you. If you don't reach the ocean, the tide will turn in your favor. And all those leaving planet Earth will be like, see you later, see you later, see you later, see you later, see you later.